soseji.
It's also take that right there to that yellow kiosk. They'll put it right.
You were watching Erica. I'm surprised. Based off the receipt credit that they got. When you hit that ticket, put it down for 2.
With that, right? And that white right?
It's good that I have you out here though, because I wanted to see how you can do it. I didn't get a chance to look at that. So when it does this,
It's full.
Oh.
elevator.
These are the bathrooms. Huh?
Every single day. By the way, folks, those actually happen because of the rotation of the Earth inside the gravitational pull. It's not necessarily that the tides are moving in and out as much as it is that we're actually moving within the gravitational pull of the Earth. Very interesting sort of topic to go into that too. Now, these swings I'm referring to, they have all sorts of effects on the river. They change the speed of the current, the depth of the river, and they will even change the literal direction of the current. And folks, just to illustrate what I'm speaking about right here, at this very moment, we're currently experiencing what's known as the flood tide. Right now, the river here is flooding, whereby the water in the channel, friends, currently is running in from the ocean behind you. So we're sailing with the current right now as we speak. By the way, as a boat handler, absolutely not. What I would prefer to be doing, I would actually load up to drive my boat or sail my boat into the current if I can help it. Incidentally, we find ourselves sailing with it at the moment. And all that means, folks, all that means is that Richard up here, Captain Richard, he's just having to do just a little bit more boat handling, a little bit more turning of the wheel to keep that stern nice and straight behind us. That's all that means. Now, that might be the case right now, but folks, a little bit later this evening, when that tidal swing happens again, the water here in the river, 180 degrees, it's going to change its direction and begin running out during the ebb tide. That's when the river will be ebbing. Which means, folks, that right now salt water is running in from the ocean behind you while it floods, and then later today, fresh water will be running out while it ebbs. And so both of those things are running back and forth all day, creating a mixture in the water, that being brackish water. So technically speaking, friends, that's what we have out here. This is brackish water, mixture of the two. It's particularly salty brackish water. And that's actually because of a geographical feature known as the South Atlantic Bight. That's a series of shelves in the continental ocean floor beyond the coast behind us. And they actually cascade down into the mouth of the river, which exacerbates the rush of salt water that comes in when it floods. So we see this is very salty water, very nutrient-rich water too, which is a key reason why it's able to sustain a healthy ecosystem, right? Thriving with wildlife. I mentioned some of the animals that we see here, and all of that really has to do with the fact that they always find the sustenance and nutrients they need to thrive right here in the river, despite shipping traffic. Which, speaking of shipping traffic, folks, the port did not anticipate it coming that close, and literally 2 vessels have struck the bridge. Now, obviously, that was a problem, right? That was a situation to contend with. But folks, what was decided was just to continue to invest in the shipping industry. You know, they saw what it was doing in this area for the country at large. In some ways, I think that insight was a bit prophetic. And what we found, folks, is that the port economy has continued to grow for decades. And so what they did was they decided to build what we're looking at today. In 1991, the Eugene Talmadge Memorial Bridge was finished. So that brought the clearance up to 135 feet over high tide, up to 185 feet over high tide. So that was an awesome, accomplishment, right? Great improvement. I love the bridge. I mentioned it's iconic and its appearance. But friends, let me remind you, that was 1991. 1991. There's a lot of folks on this boat that actually do not recall 1991, by the way. Just a little disclaimer. Folks, we are back to square one. Seriously, a few decades have rolled right along, and today, I'm not kidding about this, I have seen ships come through this port, and sailors will stand on the very top of their ships, like I am up here in the wing bridge. They'll reach up and touch the underside of the Talmadge Bridge, just slap the bottom. Yeah, it's like a middle schooler running through a hallway, and they got to jump up, touch the, they got to slap the backboard just because they can. That's just what it reminds me of, Now, obviously, that's cutting it too close for comfort, right? We can all agree if sailors are slapping the bridge, we're cutting it close. But fret not, everybody. Pen, hit paper. Yet another project has been greenlit. This very year, 2025, they're going to incrementally begin to raise the clearance once again. Guys, they're going to jack up the current support. It's over 600,000 jobs currently, pouring billions back into the economy, actually affecting 27 different states, equating 71% of the United States economy that actually benefits from this very thing. So we're excited to see those types of things grow, and I'll definitely explain a bit more about how that works later. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of why this port is able to function on such a prolific level. We'll get into some of that. But for now, folks, I just want to remind you guys that we did do a bit of a U-turn up at the bridge. Right, Richard, he swung our stern around, and so now we're sailing downriver towards the ocean. And therefore, we're going to be sailing back alongside River Street off the starboard or right side for the next several minutes. Friends, this first stretch of River Street, this is known as Plant Riverside. Plant Riverside. It's actually named that way because it used to be a real power plant. It was a coal-fired plant for many years. First of its kind here in Savannah. actually powered the lights and trolley systems on the riverfront for quite some time. Now, obviously that's not the case anymore, right? Today what we're looking at is the luxury hotel, the JW Marriott. The Marriott, that's what we're looking at today. Which, friends, let me remind you, you don't have to be staying in the Marriott, as a guest. You don't need to have a room or something in order to enjoy a lot of what they have for the public. Y'all can actually walk right into the Marriott. It's a museum inside. There's a chrome-plated dinosaur that hangs from the ceiling. There's gifts and artifacts in there. A lot of great restaurants and bars, indoor, outdoor, rooftop. So plenty of places to explore on Flint Riverside, and definitely encourage you to do so on a beautiful day like today. Now, I do want to mention that as Flint Riverside recedes, as we pass by the edge of it in the next, few moments here, we're going to get a better look at some of the more historic buildings of River Street, some of the more historic elements of the riverfront. And you know what, guys? I'm just going to be candid with you. I can give you guys a 4-hour tour on just the historic significance of River Street. Really, there's so much to know about this area. And, I actually will get into a bit more of that later for you guys as it pertains to sort of the era of the Civil War, just because I think, in my opinion, that's some of the most significant history that relates to the riverfront. But for now, I just want to kind of bring up the presence of ballast stones. I think this is sort of interesting. Folks, if you were on your way down to the river today and you almost broke a heel or twisted an ankle or something, if you had a bit of trouble getting down to the River Street because of the cobblestone walkways and pathways that wind down to the river, I want to tell you that a lot of those stones, some of the ones you may have been tripping over today, originally were ballast stones that came off of the back of English merchant mariner ships as well as Spanish conquistador ships as early as pre-settled Savannah. So I'm talking about the early 1700s, the 1600s. Today there's all sorts of ways in which we ballast our vessels. But during those days, if you were a sailor, if you wanted to go pick up some cargo, you had to account for weight distribution ahead of time. Cardiac arrest. This cannon fired it off. We also have dolphins off the right side, everybody. So you'll have to choose between the cannon and the dolphins. You'll just have to make that discernment. Is everybody okay? No pacemakers we need to check or anything? All right. Once again, friends, that is old Fort Jackson over there. Not to be confused with Fort Jackson, by the way. If you like going to historic sites and things, you like visiting forts, it's just worth knowing that there's a distinction between Fort Jackson and Old Fort Jackson. They are indeed two separate places. That's just worth knowing. This is, in fact, Old Fort Jackson that we're looking at today. And it definitely deserves that distinction. Guys, this was built on an old Revolutionary War battery, officially beginning its construction in 1808 in anticipation of the War of 1812. It's a very old structure, right? I mean, some of the founding fathers in this nation's boots would have trodden over the campus there. Now, today it operates, like I said, as a museum. They do the live cannon firings. They do the reenactments. I'd encourage anybody to see the fort if you get the chance to do so. I would like to talk a little bit about the way things would unravel in the end of the war, but even the secession itself, the beginning of the Civil War. And as it relates to the fort, friends, what you need to know is that this fort was Confederate occupied at the time. In the Civil War, the Savannah itself was a Confederate city, at least politically speaking. The fort was occupied by the Confederate Army, and the Union Army had a blockade stationed out beyond the coast, which, by the way, Captain Richard is swinging her stern towards the ocean right now. If you think you see a floating city in the distance, that's actually an inbound container ship coming in from the ocean right now. By the way, talked a bit about that container traffic earlier. Well, we're going to see a great example of that. She'll be coming in behind us.
So the Union Army had a blockade out there stationed beyond the coast, and guys, that blockade would be so significant in the unraveling economically of the war because it would reduce the amount of help and support garrisons that could come in here through the river and help the Confederates in Savannah.
That's why there's that big suspension.